Hi math class, I hope you're all doing well. Fantastic work yesterday, writing your ratio sentences, finding your mixed numbers, and calculating area. So keep up the awesome work. In today's class, we're going to be looking at lesson 75, parts 1 through 5. So let's look at part 1. In part 1, we're looking for equivalent fractions. It tells us that these are equations that show a pair of equivalent fractions. One of the numbers is missing. So your job will be to figure out that missing number. So if you look at part A, we have the fraction 7 over 6, and then it should equal another fraction with the bottom number of 540. So what we have to do is find this missing top number. So our first step will be to find what we are multiplying this fraction by to get this fraction, right? So I'm going to put a little fraction here, and we have to find the top and the bottom number for that fraction. We have to remember that since this is going to be an equivalent fraction, both the top and the bottom number of this fraction will be the same. So all we have to do is find either the top or the bottom number, and then we can solve for this other missing number. So our first step will be to find this bottom number. Since we have two numbers here, we can solve. Right, so our first step will be to divide 540 by 6. So I'm going to put 540 underneath the division sign, and the 6 will go right in front. Right, I'm going to look at the 5. I can't divide 6 into 5, but I know I can divide 6 into 54. Right, so we know that 6 can go into 54 how many times? It'll be 9 times, so 9 will go on the top. Now I have to divide 6 into 0. And we know that 6 can go into 0 times. So that means that 6 multiplied by 90 gave us 540. Since we know that this will be an equivalent fraction, that means that our top number and bottom number will be the same. So I'm going to put the 90 right up here. So now what we have to do is solve for this missing top number. Right, so we're going to multiply 7 multiplied by 90, and that will give us our new top number. So I'm going to write that here. 90 multiplied by 7. 7 multiplied by 0 is 0. Remember that any number multiplied by 0 will give us 0. And now we have to multiply 9 and 7. So you can either skip count by 9s, or you can use your multiplication chart. We know that that will give us 63. So our answer for the missing number is 630. Right? So what we did is we showed that 7 over 6 is equivalent to, or is the same as, the fraction 630 over 540. So you can pause the video now, make sure that we have all of these written in, and then we'll go over part B as well as another example. So in part B, we're going to follow the same steps that we did in part A. So let me write down our problem. We have the fraction 30 over 5 equals blank over 455. So once again, we're going to follow the same steps. Right, we have our missing number that we're going to have to solve for. But before we can solve, we have to figure out what we have to multiply this fraction by to get this fraction. So I'm going to put my multiplication sign and then my division sign. Right, so in the bottom, we have two numbers, so that means we can solve for the missing bottom number in our equivalent fraction. Once again, this 455 will go underneath my division sign, and this 5 will go right in front. So just like we did in our earlier problem, I'm going to try to divide 5 into the first number, which is 4. It won't go into 4, so then I'll look at the next number as well. We know that 5 can go into 45 9 times, so I'll put 9 right on top. And then the 5 goes into 5 1 time. So we know that the bottom number in my equivalent fraction will be 91. Right? 5 multiplied by 91 will give us 455. Since this is going to be an equivalent fraction, the bottom number will be the same as our top number. So if the bottom number was 91, our top number will be 91 as well. So now what we have to do is figure out what 30 multiplied by 91 is. So we can do that right here. 30 multiplied by 91. 1 multiplied by 0 is 0. 1 multiplied by 3 is 3. Now I'm going to look at this 9. But remember, since this 9 is in the tens, I have to represent that by putting the 0. And then 9 multiplied by 0 gives me 0. And 9 multiplied by 3 gives me 27. Now all I have to do is add these two numbers together. 0 plus 0 is 0. 3 plus 0 is 3. 7 plus nothing is 7. And 2 plus nothing is 2. So my answer will be 2,730. So it's a pretty big number. So once again, what we have to do, guys, is first we have to figure out our equivalent fraction. So what do I have to multiply 5 by to get 455? So we did that with division. Once I figured out one of those numbers, the other number will be the same, and then I had to just multiply the two top numbers to get our missing number. So you can pause the video now, and then you can try part C on your own. And I'll see you in part 2. So in part 2, we're looking at number families. So we're going to be looking at number families with money coming in, money coming out, and then what the person ended up with. So the format of our number family will be this. I'm going to write it out so that it's easier to see. So all three of our number families in part 2 will follow the same outline. First, we have what the person ended up with, how much money went out. So these will be our small numbers, and then our big number will be how much money went in. So let's read the first question. A person has $218. The person spends some money. The person ends up with $24. How much did the person spend? So once again, it tells us a person has $218. That will be how much money is put in. So I'm going to put 218 right underneath the in category. Then it tells us how much the person ends up with. The person ends up with $24. So right here will be $24. So what we have to figure out is how much did the person spend, or how much money is out. So in order to do that, I have to find my small number. So I have my big number and my other small number, so I'm going to have to subtract. So we're going to subtract 218 minus 24. 8 minus 4 gives us 4. I can't subtract 1 minus 2, I have to borrow. So 11 minus 2 gives us 9. And then 1 minus nothing is 1. And don't forget, since we're dealing with money, I have to put in my dollar sign. So the person spent $194. So for parts B and C, you're going to use the same format. Once again, you'll have the first number will be end up, then your second one will be how much money went out, and then your big number will be how much money went in. So you can work on those problems now. You can pause the video, and then I'll see you in part 3. So in part 3, we're working on ratio word problems. So we're given two sentences, and we have to figure out our three fractions, and then we also have to write in words the two things that we're comparing. So in our first long blank, we'll use words to describe the two things we're comparing, and then we have our three fractions. So if we look at part A, it tells us there were 7 perch for every 9 bass. There were 963 bass. How many perch were there? Right, so the two things we're comparing is perch and bass. So in our first long blank, that's where we'll write those two words, perch and bass. In the first sentence, it tells us that there were 7 perch for every 9 bass. So that's where we'll write our first fraction, 7 perch for every 9 bass. This second fraction is going to be our equivalent fraction, so we'll leave it alone for now. And then in our second sentence, we'll get one of the numbers for our last fraction. So it tells us that there were 963 bass, right? So I'm going to look for bass. There were 963. So what I have to do now is figure out, what do I multiply 9 by to get 963? But in order to find that number that we multiply by, we're going to divide. So I'm going to divide 963 by 9. Right? So I know that 9 can go into 9 one time, and then it can't go into 6, but 9 can go into 63. Since this number has 2 digits, that means that my top number will also have to have 2 digits. So I know that 9 goes into 63 7 times, but I have to write a 0, 7. So that means that my bottom number will be 107 in my equivalent fraction. Right? 9 multiplied by 107 gave us 963. So since this is an equivalent fraction, that means that my top number will be the same. So if my bottom number was 107, that means my top number is also 107. So now what we have to figure out is 7 multiplied by 107, and that will give us our missing number for our last fraction. Right, so we can write this right over here, 107 multiplied by 7. 7 multiplied by 7 gives us 49, so I'll put the 9 there, carry over my 4. 7 multiplied by 0 is 0 plus 4, which is just 4. And then 7 multiplied by 1, which gives us 7. So that means that our missing number in our last fraction is 749. So once again, guys, all we have to do in this first long blank is you're going to write in words the two things that you're comparing. In the first sentence, it will tell you the fraction for the first blank. The second blank will be the equivalent fraction. So your top and bottom number will be the same. But we don't have to worry about that. And then in your second sentence, it will give you one of the numbers in your last fraction. Once we have that plugged in, we're going to have to divide that number by the number in our first fraction, and that will give you the number for your equivalent fraction. Remember, your top and bottom number will be the same, and then all we had to do then is solve for the last missing number. So you can pause the video now and try working on parts B and C on your own. And I'll see you in part 4. So in part 4 of today's lesson, you're going to be practicing your multiplication. So once again, you can try skip counting or use your multiplication chart to help you. And then for part 5, you're going to be practicing your division. So if you guys have any questions, please let us know. You're doing an awesome job, and we'll see you in our next lesson. See ya, guys.